Hello, chemistry students. So this is Mrs. Krumschneider, and I'm trying something a little bit different here today for going over your ChemQuest 16. So we'll see how this works. So ChemQuest 16 was about an electron's address and energy levels and sublevels. As you know, in his solar system model, Bohr proposed that electrons are located at energy levels. The current model of the atom isn't as simple as that, however. Sublevels are located inside energy levels, just like subdivisions are located inside cities. Each sublevel is given a name. Note the following table. So the first energy level can have one sublevel, and it's an S. Second energy level can have two sublevels, S and P. Third energy level can have three, S, P, and D. And fourth can have four, S, P, D, and F. Note that there is no such thing as a D sublevel inside the second energy level because there are only S and P sublevels inside of the second energy level. So, question number 1 asks, how many sublevels exist in the first energy level, right? And there's one sublevel, and it's an S sublevel. Number 2, how many sublevels exist in the second energy level? There are two sublevels, and they are the S and the P sublevels. How many sublevels exist in the third energy level? There are 3. The S, the P, and the D sublevels. How many sublevels would you expect to exist in the fifth energy level? So what they want you to notice is the first has 1, second has 2, third has 3, fourth has 4. So in the fifth energy level, we would expect that there could be 5 sublevels. Okay? So basically, the energy level, the number of the energy level equals the number of possible sublevels. Number 5, does the 3F sublevel exist? Note that 3 stands for the third energy level. So in the third energy level, can I have an F? No, because there are only S, P, D. Sorry about that. There are only S, P, D, and F, and S, P, and D, sorry, sublevels in the third energy level. Okay, so your the person who wrote this is kind of making it like a city here a little bit. Okay, so information about orbitals. So far we have learned that inside energy level there are different sublevels. Now we will look at orbitals. Orbitals are located inside sublevels, just like streets are located inside subdivisions. Different sublevels have different numbers of orbitals. So your textbook, or the person who wrote this, is saying, right, we have a city, okay, and a city, okay, is like the energy level. And within a city, we have a subdivision, which is a grouping of houses. And a subdivision is like a sublevel. Or that's what a sublevel is. Okay? Now your book is saying, or the person who wrote this is saying, okay, just like inside a subdivision we have streets, inside a sublevel we have orbitals. Okay, and all of this is so that we can figure out where the electrons are. And, okay, so for sublevels, remember we had S, we had P, we had D, and we had F. Okay? So now we're saying different sublevels have different numbers of orbitals. So the S sublevel, okay, can have 1 orbital. The P sublevel can have 3, the D can have 5, and the F can have 7. So here's an important fact. only 2 electrons can fit in each orbital. So in an s orbital, you can have a maximum of 2 electrons. In a d orbital, you can have a maximum of 2 electrons. In any orbital, there can only be 2 electrons. Since a d sublevel has 5 orbitals, right, because that's what it's saying right here, and each orbital can contain up to 2 electrons, then a d sublevel can contain 10 electrons from 5 orbitals, each holding 2. Pay attention to the difference between sublevel and orbital. So question number 6, how many orbitals are there in a p sublevel? Well, a p sublevel has 3 possible orbitals, each holding 2 electrons. So 3 times 2 electrons gives us 6 electrons total. Number 7, how many orbitals are there in a d sublevel? Oh, sorry, how many orbitals, not electrons? Getting ahead of myself, right? Orbitals, right? This is how many orbitals, so there are 3 orbitals. How many orbitals are there in a d sublevel? There are 5. How many sublevels would be found in the entire second energy level, right? Second energy level can have 2 sublevels because the number of sublevels is equal to what energy level we're in. Okay, now which sublevels would it be? The S and the P. How many orbitals can be found in the entire second energy level? So an S sublevel has 1 orbital. The P sublevel has 3 orbitals. So in the entire second energy level, I can have 4 orbitals total. Number 9, how many electrons can fit in an F sublevel? So remember, an F sublevel has 7 orbitals. So there's 7 orbitals. Each orbital can hold 2 electrons. So that gives me 14 electrons total. How many electrons can fit in an F orbital? Now, because it's orbital, it's only 2 electrons. Number 10, how many electrons can fit in a d orbital, in a p orbital, in any kind of orbital? Any orbital can hold 2 electrons. Okay. In your own words, what is the difference between a sublevel and an orbital? And that's kind of up to you, right? But the person who wrote this said orbitals are contained within sublevels. A sublevel is a grouping of orbitals. Okay? So orbitals are contained within sublevels. A sublevel is a grouping of orbitals. Number 12. Okay? How many electrons can fit in each of the following energy levels? So the first energy level can only have the S sublevel, because it only can have 1, and the S sublevel only has 1 orbital, so it can hold 2 electrons. In the second energy level, I can have 2 sublevels, the S sublevel and the P sublevel. The S sublevel has 1 orbital. The P sublevel has 3 orbitals. So that's 4 altogether. Times 2 electrons gives me 8. All right, third energy level. Again, I can have 3 sublevels. They're going to be the 3S, the 3P, and the 3D. Now an S has 1 orbital, a P sublevel has 3 orbitals, a D sublevel has 5 orbitals. So that gives me 9 orbitals total times 2 electrons gives me 18 electrons total. Fourth energy level can have 4 sublevels. a 4s, a 4p, a 4d, and a 4f. An s sublevel has 1 orbital, a p sublevel has 3, a d sublevel has 5, and f has 7. So that's 12, 13, 16 orbitals total times 2 electrons gives me 32 electrons. So kind of on my kind of picture over here, I have to remember that an orbital can hold 2 electrons. So information representing the most probable location of an electron. And again, we're concerned about electrons because all of the chemistry that happens in an atom happens because of electrons. So the following is an address for an electron, a sort of shorthand notation. The diagram below represents an electron located in an orbital inside of the p sublevel in the 3rd energy level. Example number 1. 3p, we see 3 lines and an up arrow. Some important facts about the above diagram. The arrow represents an electron. Okay, so this is telling me it's an electron. The upward direction means this electron is spinning clockwise. 3p means that the electron is in the p sublevel of the 3rd energy level. So this is my energy level. This is my sublevel. Okay. Each blank represents an orbital. Since there are 3 orbitals in the p sublevel, there are also 3 blanks written beside the p. So the reason that there are 3 lines here is because p sublevel has 3 orbitals. In the diagram, the electron is in the first of the 3p orbitals. Here's another example, example number 2, 4d, down arrow, 5 lines. In example number 2, why are there 5 lines drawn next to the D? Well, a D sublevel has 5 orbitals. That's why there are 5 lines. So each line represents an orbital, a d orbital. In example 2, what does it mean to have the arrow pointing down? So if the up arrow is clockwise, down arrow is opposite. What's the opposite of clockwise? Counterclockwise. Okay, so this means that the electron is spinning counterclockwise. Number 15. Write the notation for an electron in a 2s orbital spinning clockwise. So what they want me to do is to write something like this, right? So 2s, so I'm just going to go ahead and write 2s, right? 2 tells me it's in the 2nd energy level. S tells me S sublevel. Now, how many lines should I have for an S sublevel? How many orbitals does an S sublevel have? Only 1. So I'm going to have 1 line. Now, the electron is spinning clockwise, which is an up arrow. So my notation looks like this. 16, write the notation for an electron in the 1st energy level spinning clockwise. So the 1st energy level means I should have a 1. Now remember, in the 1st energy level, I can only have 1 sublevel, which means I'm going to have an S. An S sublevel only has 1 orbital, so I only have 1 line. And I want it spinning clockwise, so my arrow is going to be up. Number 17, what is wrong with the following notation? You should find 2 things wrong. Well, this says D, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first problem, right, is that a D sublevel has 5 orbitals, therefore should have 5 lines. So that's the first problem. The second problem, the second energy level can only have 2 sublevels, which are going to be S and P. So the second problem is there is no D sublevel in the second energy level. So those are the 2 problems. Number 18, write the notation for an electron in the 4th energy level in an F sublevel spinning clockwise. So 4th energy level means I write a 4. F sublevel means I write an F. Now, how many lines should I put next to an F? Remember, an F sublevel has 7 orbitals, so I need 7 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now I want the electron to be spinning clockwise, which means I should put it up. And it really doesn't matter which line you put it on at this point. So I hope that that helps if you had questions on ChemQuest 16.